Hey, Pasa Calexico. Welcome back to the podcast. Before we begin, I want to take the time to thank my friends here at Calexico Brewing for allowing me to use the space to record this episode here today. And today we have somebody that's given the Imperial Valley kind of an experience to taste a little bit of what the valley is, but some of the ingredients you can find that maybe people native to the Imperial Valley use and ate back in the days. My guest today is the owner and chef of Ursa, Aaron Lopez. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Before we get into the food business and all that, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a Calexico native,
Yeah, that's right.
but you haven't been here in a while. But
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about you growing up here and maybe tell us up to right before you got into the food business and all that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Calexico, born and raised here. I graduated in 2004 and left. I had really no desire to stay much longer. And although I had a fine time living here, I had a really fantastic set of friends, and we were part of this, punk scene, and things were cool. But I definitely wanted to explore and see what was out there. And so I had the opportunity to leave, and I left soon after high school, 2004, 2005, and I went. Originally, I found myself playing music, which is something I did down here. And, I made friends in Los Angeles and played in punk bands and eventually started making art, and was just another outlet for me. At some point, I met a friend who wanted to go half on an art gallery in Echo Park. This is like the early days of Echo Park, when there were still gunshots everywhere and everything was super cheap, and so we did. So my friend and I got an art gallery, and we were just doing that for a while. She had a clothing shop at one side, and I had a gallery on my side. And, it was cool. Like, we'd have parties there. We'd had openings, and I did a lot of sculpting. That was kind of my medium. And eventually, art can't pay the bills. So I asked my buddy for a restaurant. He worked in a restaurant or at a bar at the time, and I asked him for a job, and he got me a job, and I fell in love with the industry. It was chaotic, and it was a bunch of pirates, and everyone was just, it was like-minded people. And I was like, I could relate to these people. So I found my way into culinary school, and the rest is history. Like, I love the intensity of it. So. And
growing up, you were always like creative or into art, or is it something that,
I think so. I mean, my mother was always, I think she knew exactly who I was from a young age, and she helped kind of promote this subculture within me. And so, she introduced me to a lot of music when I was very young, and certain artists and stuff. And she always let me kind of be myself and encouraged me to be unique. And so, I never had parents that stifled me, and that was really nice. So I guess so. I guess I've always been somewhat creative, or at least longing for that. Yeah. And
you went into by art, you mean into you mentioned that you were kind of like a carpentry or
yeah, what I wanted to do for a living was make furniture. I liked the idea of working with my hands and kind of manipulating these products and wood and metal and stuff, and I did that a little bit when in my early 20s, or I guess when I was 19, 20. I did some art installations for Urban Outfitters and for a couple movie sets, actually, or like little like pilots. But that's kind of what I thought I'd do, was make sort of high-end furniture. I had these big plans of these showpieces and this way of expressing myself through furniture, and I think that's why cooking resonated with me, is because I'm still manipulating a product to some degree. Mm-hmm. So.
What was your relationship with food growing up? Was it, were you somebody that was a picky eater, or you ate pretty much anything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have too many memories with food. I get asked that a lot, and I'm not too sure why food. Maybe it chose me. Like, we all sat down for dinner, and that was cool. I definitely have probably some of my better memories were from just the family coming together for dinner. but I didn't have a huge relationship to it. I wasn't obsessed with it, and no one really taught me about food or really how to cook. It was nice. It tastes good, but it kind of stopped there. So I still to this day, I don't know how I ended up. I think it was more of the attitude that I liked rather than nurturing people,
Oh, and did your mom, was she the one that cooked most of the meals at home, or?
My whole family did. Like, my whole family always cooked. If we were at my grandparents' house, both my grandparents cooked. And so, yeah, I mean, everyone, there was no like definitive title of who was the cook. It was just who's cooking tonight. And so that was cool. I was able to embrace that. Like, we all do what's necessary to cook. So.
Yeah, because at my house, my mom did most of the cooking, but when it came to like, for some reason, when it came to like stuff that was more complex, like my dad made a killer menudo.
Oh yeah.
And when it came like even in Thanksgiving, like the turkey, my dad made it, like things like that. For some reason, my dad always cooked.
Took pride in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was much like pride, but I don't know if he didn't trust my mom with it or what, but or she didn't trust herself with it. But
sure.
But yeah, my dad made most of like the bigger meals. But like on the day to day, my mom was the one that cooked.
The one. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And you mentioned the kitchen scene, and I'm pretty sure you read Kitchen Confidential.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what when you mention it, it's takes me back to that book. And I people don't know who wrote the book. It was Anthony Bourdain. That's pretty much how we got big.
Introduced to him. Yeah. It is an accurate book. I mean, for anyone who hasn't read it, it can be grotesque, and it was definitely pulling back the curtains on this industry that is sort of taboo to a lot of people. It's like this weird thing where a lot of families or parents they can't understand why kids go into cooking. I don't think it's normalized yet. Maybe it is now because of the media, and it is getting a lot of attention. But in those days, it wasn't, and it was still pretty gruesome, almost like there was no rules. It was the Wild West in the kitchen. I think that's why we gravitated towards it, and our parents feared it. So
yeah, because I worked at Applebee's for like 5 years, and I mean, it wasn't as, we weren't doing drugs or whatever, but, we were having fun, listening to music, all, just messing around the kitchen, drinking afterwards. Mm-hmm. So, I didn't get that taste of, the raunchy, but I get when people talk about, working in a kitchen and what it is like, the chaos and the camaraderie about, working with other people, especially when we have like the screen full of food and like the red light blinking and the fire going off, is like,
it's intense.
Yeah. It's something that, you try to explain it to people or kind of like describe it to people, but once you're there, like it's different.
It's a rush, and I think once you experience it, it's terrifying. And that first instance of this, I'm going down, like I'm losing right now. You're either going to come back wanting the rush again, or you're just going to bow out of it. And I think the industry has an interesting way of weeding people out, because it does take a certain mindset, and you have to be a little crazy to endure that. One, you're working 14-hour days, so that even that alone will drive people out of the kitchen. But then there's the language, and there's the hours, and then there's the after parties, and they're all accurate. Yeah. All the stories are accurate.
Yeah, and to me, like I started as a dishwasher, and working at Applebee's, most of the time, like you're a dishwasher, but sooner or later you're gonna be on the line.
Sure.
And washing dishes. So I remember starting and like I was just dishwasher, but I could see like the screen and like guys, going crazy in the line. I was like, man, I hope I'm never in that situation.
No, man, it's wild.
But yeah, it's I don't know, it's fun. Sometimes I miss it sometimes.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm like, no, I don't like this, because I used to work 2 jobs. The job that I have right now, and then I would go get off from that job and then go to Applebee's for like another 8 hours. So it was like
just to close out the day.
Yeah, yeah. And closing is the worst. Like you know, you spend all night cooking and then you have to clean the kitchen. It's like
Yeah, and so my background's in fine dining, where it was like, I've worked in restaurants where you're actually not allowed to speak. It was just like, yes, chef, and that's it. And so, at some point, it kind of changes it kind of alters your DNA, because you're isolated. You're around your brothers and your sisters, but you're really not allowed to speak, and so you're internalizing everything, and so that creates so much chaos. Therefore, we go out and party, and like we have to release at some point. But I mean, yeah, it's a beast. It's a beast. For sure.
How long did you work tell me about school. Like, how was school for you?
School was cool. I mean, I think, I was an all right student in high school, and kind of a little bit of a knucklehead, but only grew up in a small town and not much to do, but I was an all right kid, and, didn't really want to go to college. Like, I wanted to make music or make art somehow, that's just who I was. And I always knew I'd find my way somehow. Like, I thought I'd be all right, so I get this job in this restaurant, and basically I actually got a job as a bar back, and then originally, and after work I'd talk to the chef, because it was like a bar on one side and a chef on the restaurant on the other. And I talked to the chef, and I was exposed to all these wonderful ingredients in Los Angeles. We have all these farmers markets and things I never grew up with, So I'd ask him, like, hey man, I just got kohlrabi or rutabaga. Like, how do I treat this? Or, well, I got this tuna belly. Like, how do I treat this? And we'd, drink some whiskey after work, and he'd tell me about it. And I think the idea, and this goes back to me wanting to be a furniture maker, or even starting as a sculptor, it was the idea of taking something and manipulating it into something else. Mm-hmm. That was where the fascination started. So I asked, I just loved just the fact that he had so much knowledge on vegetables, on food, and I asked him if I could spend a day in the kitchen with him once a week, like just learning. And he's like, yeah, sure. I can't pay you, but I was like, done, let's do it. And I did. And I loved it. And I think at that point in my life, I came from a family of educators, and everyone was like counselors and teachers and stuff. And so I always, for the most part, flew straight. And I wanted to be a decent person in society. And so I was like, well, I like to cook. This is fun. Maybe there's a school, just something. I just wanted something under my belt, I didn't necessarily go to learn about cooking. I mean, I did, but it was more to just have something that was mine, that I earned. That was where it came from. And so I did. I went to Le Cordon Bleu, and I did really well. I was like working this catering job from like 4:30 in the morning to 7, and then I'd go to school from like 8 to 3, and then I'd start my kitchen job from like 3 to like 1 in the morning. So I slept for like 2.5 hours for 2 years, and I was fine. I loved it, and I did really well. I excelled, and I showed up every day, and I don't know, I just fell into it, and I sort of it just made a lot of sense. It really resonated with me, and I took it serious. At that point, then I'd quit that job, and I found the best job I could at that time in Los Angeles, and I went and applied there, and I worked there for some years, and I just threw myself into it. Yeah, and everything kind of changed at that point.
So most of your experience cooking was in the LA area, or
LA for 11 years, and then I ended up in Hawaii for 6. I was in Honolulu for 6 years. And that's a whole nother story on how that happened. And then I was in Austin for a little bit. And then this opportunity to open my restaurant came up. And so my wife and I moved back in December of this past December. And
from, the 3, different areas that you worked in, like how's the food different? Because obviously LA, I don't know what kind of restaurants you were working, but, I guess the only ones that are kind of similar is Austin and LA. There, there's a lot of Hispanic people in there.
Yeah. Well, I think LA was important for me, especially as my starting base, is because there's so much culture there. And so it wasn't this type of food or this type of food. It was just kind of this melting pot of modern food. It's like there's just so much culture, and there's like, just you name it, there was a corner for it. And so all these chefs were opening these restaurants, and it kind of became less about the style of food you're cooking and more about just what you're trying to represent. So for instance, it wasn't, I'm going to open a Mexican restaurant, I'm going to open a French restaurant or an Italian restaurant. It kind of became this modern restaurant where you pulled different influences, you know, whether it was Thai or Norwegian or, you know, and all these really fantastic techniques. Because you also had chefs from around the world coming to work at these restaurants, so they'd impart their culture. And you'd talk with them and you'd learn from them. And so that was important. That was a good way to like kick off my career, was just learning different flavor profiles. And then moving to Hawaii was, that was difficult for me because it was a slower pace and I'm just such an intense human being. It was hard to just pump the brakes, you know. It was like the crosswalks took 30 seconds. I'm like, what? You know? But again, like the culture in Hawaii is just, there's so much of it. I mean, sure, it was gravitated towards Polynesian and Asian culture. But even that was something I wasn't used to. It was more aggressive in flavor. You know, it didn't have to be so clean cut in Hawaii. It could be spicy and salty. And so that kind of opened the box for me too. Like, well, I grew up in Calexico. I didn't grow up with clean flavors. Like, I like spicy. I like big. And so Hawaii kind of gave me the green light to do that as well. And Austin too. Austin was kind of like middle fingers in the air. It's like, we're going to do us and that's it, you know? And so that was cool to have that attitude. And so I think all of it made sense at that, whatever point I was in my life.
Okay. Yeah. Because Austin right now is kind of like, it's been for a while, like where, a lot of people go to kind of like try new things, right?
Yeah. There's risk takers in Austin. I had a really good time. Austin. I didn't think I didn't know what I was getting into when I came to Austin. I came to Austin to help someone else open a restaurant, and I was like, oh, I'm going to Texas. This is heavy, you know. But definitely opened my eyes to what I thought I knew. Granted, I was in Austin in this place within Texas, but it was very different from, I guess, the rest of Texas. But it was, again, like so much community there in Austin. You know, everyone had each other's back there. And I think that's something I really missed too, was the sense of community. And I got that in Austin. So.
Yeah, and especially because there's some, I guess it's like more of a younger crowd. Right?
Yeah. It is. It's a place I think where people could just be themselves. You know, it's kind of out there and it's an experimental place and it's cool. It's a really cool place.
Artsy kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, for sure. But what were like the restaurants you were working at? Like what was the type of food you were working with?
Oh man.
Or like, was it French? Was it?
Sure. I mean, there like when I first started cooking, it was kind of this era of, they called it molecular gastronomy, where it's just, you could be experimental, you know, turning things into marshmallows and things into cotton candies and savory and pastry all mixed together. And it was smoke and mirrors, you know, it was like the very like over the top cooking. And I gravitated towards that. I think maybe at some point it got hated on a little bit because it didn't have as much soul as other places. But for me, it was about technique. And again, going back to what I originally said, I didn't really have a fascination with nurturing people. I had a fascination with manipulating products. So if somebody could teach me how to turn a bell pepper into a cotton candy, I'm like, yeah, I want to work there, you know? So I worked at these restaurants that were more showy, more technique driven.
Yeah. People like saw it as a science experiment than cooking.
You're walking into laboratories, you know? But that's all knowledge you take with you, you know, and you could strip it down and make it primitive for sure.
And then that's what you worked on in LA or? Mostly in LA.
And then when I was in Hawaii, I switched gears and I became a pastry chef. It was something that I felt like I'd been doing pretty good in my career. And I thought like, what was next? And pastry to a lot of cooks is kind of this, it's scary, you know, it's like, oh, I don't touch the pastry. Like there's a department for that. And I wanted to learn that because I'm pretty methodical. Like, you know, I calculate things, and pastry is very much of that. And so I wanted to learn that, and it just kind of was the next chapter. So I found a chef who was opening a restaurant, and he reigned from this restaurant called Dovetail in New York, and I think they had 2 or 3 stars. So he was opening his first flagship restaurant in Hawaii, and I was like, I got to work for this guy. And so I remember I went into interview. I was told I was the last interview of the day. And he was like, it was him, his wife, and the general manager. And they're like, we're actually like, we're set. We're good. We're not hiring anymore. We got everyone. But if you happen to know any pastry chefs, can you send them our way? And I was like, oh, I'm a pastry chef. Like, you should have said that. And they hired me, and I became their pastry chef. And it was just like Googling things and reading a lot of books and just kind of BSing my way through it all. But, I taught myself pastry through that. And
did they ever catch on that you weren't a pastry?
I think at some point I was pretty honest about it. Like, we all became friends, and I was just like, you know what, I'll do it. And they didn't have anyone, so I don't think they had very much choice, But through there, and then at some point I left the industry, quote unquote. My wife and I started an ice cream company. I was just kind of like done with the industry. I needed a break. And so I quit. And because I was doing pastry, I kind of fell in love with making ice cream. It was this blank canvas of just creativity. Like, you could make so many different textures and flavors. And so my wife and I started an ice cream company, and we had like a few wholesale accounts, and we had 3 different farmers markets, and we were doing the hustle, and it was cool. I mean, it was a lot of work. It was like up at 4 a.m. to get to a 6 a.m. Farmers market. It was like spinning our ice cream 3 days a week, and it was a lot of work. And I just figured, at some point I'm going to open a neighborhood joint and just serve ice cream the rest of my life. And, my kids could have their first job there. And I had this like great, this almost epiphany of like, this is what I need to do. And then I got an offer to be the executive chef at a restaurant. And I turned it down. I was like, no, I don't cook anymore. I make ice cream, like very proudly. But I'd always longed to be back in the kitchen. I think I just never admitted it. And I remember I was talking to my wife, and I was like, hey, they asked me to be the executive chef at this restaurant, almost like scoffing, like, can you believe them? And I thought my wife was going to be like, yeah, like, you don't do that anymore. Cause like cooking is hard on relationships. Like, it takes a toll on relationships. So I thought my wife was really happy with the fact that I was out of the industry. But truthfully, she knew that I wasn't happy, and I didn't even know I wasn't happy. Mm. But I remember telling her, like, yeah, they wanted me to go back to be a chef, to take over this restaurant. And I thought she'd kind of laugh it off. And she was like, you should do it. She's like, you need this. And I was like, what? No way, and I did. And then I started cooking again, and it's been nonstop ever since.
So, and then after that, that's when you came back to...
And then from there, I went to Austin. Oh, and when I was in Austin, I had a lot of time on my hands because they were building this restaurant. So my wife and I were taking these road trips. And on these road trips, we were stopping through New Mexico and Arizona and Joshua Tree. And that's where we started to kind of rediscover where we're from. Because I met my wife in Hawaii, but she's from Yuma.
Oh, wow.
And yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so we were kind of rediscovering our roots through just having time off. And that's how this whole Ursa thing started, was like, you know what? Nobody's really exploring these ingredients, And on these trips, we were able to talk to indigenous communities and seed savers and foragers, and just like, whoa, like, this is who we are, like, we're from the desert. Mm. And nobody's doing it that I'm aware of. Nobody's doing it in this sort of avant-garde way, like, let's tell the story of the desert, but less about chilies and more about indigenous crop and monsoon crops, and what was here before us, pre-colonial ingredients. And so that's how that started.
So she's from Yuma, but she's also a cook, or?
No, she don't cook. No. She found her way into a restaurant through me because we opened Ursa together. But my wife she works with sustainable energy. And yeah, nothing to do with the restaurant industry. Business major, works with sustainable energy. And then she was a guest at a restaurant I was working at, and that's how we met. And now the restaurant industry is sort of a huge part of her life now, Yeah,
definitely. Hey guys, sorry for the interruption, but I want to take this time to thank my sponsors. My friend Jake, Camilo Garcia, Aaron Lopez from Cultivating Ideas, this year's new sponsor, the Valley's champ, Guillermo Rebollar. And finally, I want to thank Will Torres and the whole VSN team, the Valley source for Imperial Valley Sports. And if you want to become a sponsor, you can go to anchor.fm/Que Pasa Calexico. Hit the support button in the middle of the page, and you can sponsor the podcast from 99 cents to up to $10 a month. Your sponsorship helps the podcast sound and look better, and also reach out more people by doing paid promotions. I want to thank all my sponsors once again, and now back to the show. So Ursa, I was looking into the name, and it has a couple of meanings, right? Is bear is it Latin or?
That's right. Yeah.
And then it's also like something with a constellation or something like that, right?
Yeah. So the way it started was we started doing a lot of research on the desert, and like I mentioned, these indigenous ingredients. We thought like there's something special happening in the world right now where people are cooking less about what type of cuisine and more about the land. For instance, there's like people in the Low Country cooking Appalachian food in a modern way, or in Peru they're cooking like based on Incan territory and so on and so on. And so that was kind of like our North Star. Our mantra was to make a restaurant that was, I guess, educational, but more about like how far can we push our land. And so we went on these sort of walkabouts, these journeys around the desert just to learn. We had like a Foraging Southwest guidebook and a point and shoot camera, and it was like super low tech. And we were just cataloging all these plants, and that's all we were doing was we'd take pictures of plants and we'd find them in this little book and we'd jot it down. And along the way, we sort of developed this business plan and this pitch deck, and the Ursa started coming to life. And so the last question was like, what are we going to call it? This sort of dream baby. And my wife and I are just like stargazers. We are obsessed with outer space, and I just have been my whole life. And so we always bring like telescopes with us when we go out camping. And so one night we just shot our scope in the sky, and the first planet the first constellation we saw was Ursa. And it was on this kind of journey of what are we going to call our restaurant? It was only an idea, it was like we were serious, but like it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen in the next 5 years here, and so we shot our scope in the sky and we saw the constellation Ursa, and it was kind of like, we didn't base it on the animal. We didn't even really base it on stars. It was just like, wow, that's a beautiful name. And it just happened to be the first thing we saw. So we're like, let's call it Ursa. And then we found out later it was sort of the it was the guiding lights for a lot of the indigenous tribes here in the desert.
Yeah. I was reading, I was like, I wonder if it's, but it's crazy that it wasn't something that you guys kind of like.
Yeah. It was super impactful in the sense of like, it was a time and place, and we happened to see it at the right time. And then we did a little research on it later.
The stars align, kind of.
The stars align, yeah, exactly. So, we ran with it, and we thought it was a really appropriate name.
So what are some of the, plants that you discover that are, native that, indigenous people maybe used to cook or just to eat? And
Yeah. Some were just like these iconic ones that, everyone knows, like chia. There's like chia pets in the 90s, like chia seeds you eat for high fiber. And so realizing that had a huge importance in our community as like desert people. So getting to know the anatomy of the chia has been really, really fun for us and very fruitful to see like how versatile this plant can be. And so many other things that we deemed weeds, globe mallow and lamb's quarter and amaranth and all these wonderful things that are, high in fiber, rich in iron, and that we've kind of like thrown on the back burner as like weeds, there are nutrients, and like we can replace them with romaine lettuce and spinach and things like that. They're indigenous to us, and they can survive these high temperatures, and so being able to explore these has been really, really fun for us.
How far is the area where you kind of like discovered or search, to find all these?
So like just to provide clarity, like we're looking at, so our restaurant Ursa is looking at the Southwest Desert on a macro level. And so what makes up the Southwest Desert are 4 deserts. So it's Chihuahua, Sonoran, Mojave, and Great Basin, which span over like 3 or 4 states and a little into Mexico. So we're looking at the Southwest Desert on a macro level, the entire thing. So for instance, during these hot seasons, August and September, we can turn to the high desert in the Great Basin, Nevada and Arizona. We can start pulling junipers and rose hips and those things that a lot of us here in the desert didn't know exist, but they're part of our region. So it expands quite a bit. Like it takes up 4 or 5 states. So.
Do you guys grow some of your own, or do you guys get them from somebody else?
So right now we forage ourselves, or we work with foragers. So we're not technically growing anything. However, we've gotten to this really great place in my career where I'm kind of over buying things in boxes, like I want a direct relationship with where my food is coming from. And so we've met these seed savers and these foragers and just one by one, they're, we're getting introduced to somebody who's introducing to someone else who just has are like-minded and want to really pull back the curtains on the desert. And they're going out and they're in this heat and they're foraging this stuff. And they're knowledgeable and they understand what they do and why they're important. And then they just ship it to us. And so it's fun because at least every day, sometimes every other day, we'll get 2-3 packages of ingredients that we're unfamiliar with. But some of them we recognize, we're like, oh, that's the weeds that grow here that we mow or trash. Or some of them are just so exotic and foreign to us. But yeah, I mean, we're just getting everything shipped in from right here, around the desert, and from people going out and getting them. Yeah,
because you're dealing with stuff that you can't really go to the market.
Yeah, I mean, it we constantly have the conversation of where's the line? How the original plan was to open a restaurant that has American game, no beef, no pork, no chicken. It's just going to be pre-colonial ingredients. And that was always where we wanted to get to, because it's hard to get to that point. So it was we did have a couple things that were well, this farmer grows this here. Mm-hmm. It may not be indigenous to us, but it's grown locally. Yeah. But now we're getting to the point where we've weeded that out and we're strictly using what is indigenous to here.
So I'm guessing this season you use quail a lot, or
quite a bit. Yeah, we've had quail on the menu since we opened, and we'll probably always have it. Now the dish will probably rotate, and it'll just be quail different ways. But the woman who raises our quail is from Westmoreland, and we know where it comes from, and I pick it up from her twice a week. She knows the names of it. I mean, it's quite beautiful, It's cool to see this woman caring for these quails, and so yeah, we'll have quail around for a while.
That's cool. Yeah. So what when you presented this idea to, I don't know, friends and family, maybe even your family, what was their initial thought?
Great idea, maybe not Imperial Valley, And the thing is, we did look in other places originally. It didn't even cross my mind to open this here. It was we looked in New Mexico and we looked in Arizona and things like that, and even in Austin. And then my friend had this restaurant that we currently own, and he's like, hey, listen, I've got a lot of things going on right now. He had his own brewery and things, and he's like, I want to keep this sort of in the family. I think it's a special place. And he was right. And he said, why don't you come take it over? And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I could move back, And I talked to my wife about it, and we took a day or two to think about it. And it's just we put it out there. We made the pitch deck, and we made the sort of vision board of Ursa, and it presented itself in the form of, here's a restaurant on downtown Main Street in El Centro. Who are we to say, no, go ahead and redo that? It presented itself that way, and we took advantage of that. So,
yeah, because the valley isn't used to. Because I read the article. What was her name again? TJ. Yeah. And I think she mentioned that you guys don't see yourselves as fine dining.
Yeah, I think we don't. I want a restaurant. I think fine dining has this sort of preconceived notion of it has to have white tablecloths and it has to be fancy and the shirts have to be tucked in and it's very pinky in the air. And that's fine. You know, like my background is fine dining and I loved it. However, I don't want an uber stuffy place. I want loud music and I want like the service will be fantastic and the plates will be beautiful and the food will be perfect, but it still needs to be a neighborhood joint, you know? And I think for the most part, we're a blue collar community and we wear that with pride. And me personally, I'd like to play into that and have an approachable place where someone could just come in and have a couple bites to eat and a beer, you know, or like some really fantastic natural wines, or, you know, like I don't really want it to be this whole song and dance, you know. Now we do offer a really fantastic experience, you know. I think there's a story there, but at the end of the day, anyone could just stumble off the street and have it and just hang out, you know. And like it's got to be that place. It has to be approachable for everyone. Yeah,
and especially being, you know, that location has always been that place to a lot of people in the valley.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's important for, you know, that kind of like that feeling that strangers had, that, you know, people just walked in and you know, just had a beer and chat with Ernie, and you know.
And I think, I mean, Ernie is like, I've known Ernie for forever, and he's just had, you know, such a thumbprint on the Imperial Valley, and for him to kind of say, like, he was one of the first people I gave my pitch deck to. I was like, hey, like, what do you think of this? And so for him to sort of say, why don't you come take over my place was an honor, you know? And so we wanted to do it justice.
Yeah. How's it going, man? I did. And you know, what has been the feedback so far of, you know, because it's fairly new, right?
Yeah. So far so good, you know, and like all I know is what people tell me. I don't know what happens behind, you know, when they leave the restaurant, but we've gotten good reviews, and I try to touch tables and talk to guests, and it's all been really positive and a good reminder of what we're doing is important. And I'm not really doing this for, like, I want a place that that we as desert people, as locals, can be proud of. You know, I want locals to say, like, well, we have Ursa, like that's ours, you know. And it's not to gloat, it's not to boast, it's not to like have a place that nobody could afford or even all the accolades. I just want a place that, like, us growing up here can say, like, that's ours, like we got that spot, you know. And so I think people get it, and we've gotten a lot of receptive people, and I'm definitely grateful for them, you know.
Mm-hmm. And what is, you know, for somebody that's still like not sure about it, like what's the, you know, when you get there, you sit there, like what's the feeling that you're trying to put out to the diners?
No, totally. So our concept at Ursa is a restaurant that highlights indigenous ingredients from the Southwest Desert, monsoon crops, utilizing these pre-colonial ingredients and animals. And so, yeah, I mean, it's sort of a smaller plate item. You know, because of my time in Hawaii, we modeled it after a lot of what we call izakaya, which are these sort of Japanese small bites where you go in to get, like, every dish is like 1 to 6 bites, you know? So we don't want people to kind of have like, I'll have this, what are you going to have? And then he'll have this and we want it like, we'll have this, and everyone just passing around and having a good time. Like that's kind of the flavor we're going for, you know, and we just want people to show up, have a good time, listen to some music, laugh, drink some really fantastic wine, and just kind of see what we're about. Like, it's definitely, you know, I think a lot of people are worried that they have to take a risk to eat there, but it's not as experimental as a lot of people think. Like, it's quite approachable.
Yeah, I think that's one of the, you know, when you know, I've never like really had like fine dining or whatever, but sometimes you go to the places that aren't what people are used to.
Yeah.
And mainly with my wife, because she's a little bit of a picky eater. I really love vegetables. It's like I can eat vegetables every day. She doesn't like vegetables as much. So like a lot of the times when you go to places that do, you know, kind of have a balanced plate. The vegetable and the protein is a big part of the whole meal. So something like for me, it's kind of like rough to take her, or even friends that aren't used to like
sure
to like kind of invite them to like places like this that it's something different.
It is different in the sense of it hasn't been done yet, but I think the flavors, it's old friends on new plates. Like there's something for everyone, and I think that if you go, it won't be as sort of threatening as you think. Like, like I said, I'm born and raised here, and I take pride in that, and I really enjoy eating here. Like that's kind of something I missed when I left was all the good food, and like, so I play into those flavors, and I have been for a very long time. Like even in my time in LA and Hawaii, like I used what I had, what I knew, and what I knew was the Imperial Valley. And so, we do dish that's like, it's kind of iconic in our restaurant at Ursa, where it is kind of paying homage to machaca, because that's something we all grew up with. And believe it or not, a lot of the world doesn't know what that is. Even in LA, I'd go ask for machaca, and it's like, that wasn't really a thing. That's a thing here. So we do our version of that, and it's paying homage to that. And a lot of the things we do pay homage to what I grew up eating, and what I grew up eating was flavors of the Imperial Valley.
So for those that don't know, I know where Strangers was at. So people who don't know, where's the Ursa located at?
Yeah, Ursa's located at 612 West Main Street in downtown El Centro. It's the old Strangers building across the street from Tiandic and Simply at Home. But yes, right smack in the center on Main Street in El Centro. And I think there's a group of people that are really trying to revitalize, Main Street. And I know there were some doing it before I got here, and that's really special. And we're definitely trying to pick up where they left off. They created a great foundation for us. A lot of the artists and a lot of the entrepreneurs the past 10 years have really tried to, and it's an uphill battle, it's no secret, but we are definitely here to stay, and we want to give back to the community in the sense of you can't say that there's nothing to do in the Imperial Valley unless you do it, and I think that was a big thing for us was we can't just keep saying there's nothing to do here. We actually have to like give people something to do.
Yeah.
And so that's...
and I always talked about, that group in El Centro, Ernie and Derek, and then the people in Tindic, and that little group that has been there forever, and they have like this following that every time they have an event, there's always people there. It might be the same people, but it's community.
Yeah,
you feel welcome even if you're not from that little group, but you always feel welcome.
Yeah,
and I always give kudos to Ernie and them, because
for sure
they've like you said, it's not easy, and they're not giving up, and you're a good addition to that little group.
Thank you.
So
thank you so much.
And
Appreciate it.
And now that the weather's turning, there's gonna be more chances to do like more outdoor things. Maybe like street walks and stuff like that. So
yeah, we're hoping to get the community back together. From what I heard, I wasn't here for it, but COVID really took a hit on the. Like everywhere else, and I hope it didn't kind of kill the momentum. Sometimes people just need a little more inspiration, right? Like some new blood to kind of boost back morale and stuff. And so we're hoping to be a part of that, and yeah, there's great things to come for sure.
So, can you want to shout out some of your employees that your little
oh my god
crew?
Like my employees are insane. Like first of all, they believe in this as much as I do, which is like it's crazy to tell a group of people from the valley, like, we're going to open this restaurant that's about indigenous ingredients. No one knows anything about it, but let's do it. And they're like, I'm down. So huge shout out to, Chef Fernando. He's been by my side. He's with me in the kitchen, and Alexis and Jose, who've also been with me in the kitchen. Our general manager, who's also from Calexico, Monica, she's been with us since the beginning, and she's sort of a big driving force for us. My wife, June, has believed in me since way too long. And then, we have people in the front, Nick and Naomi, who Their servers and food runners, they've been, when we were doing pop-ups, they've been with me that long before we had a brick and mortar. We were doing these pop-up dinners, and they've been with me. Nick and Naomi have been with me since then. So loyal people, very loyal, and we become a family. There's like 9 of us or 8 of us. Like, we stick together.
Yeah. How similar is it to the bear? How many times do people ask you that? Huh?
All the time. I get asked that all the time. And it's funny because like 10 years ago, everyone asked me if I'd seen the movie Ratatouille. So it's like, it's changed. It's quite similar. Yeah. To the point where I don't watch the bear. Like, I lived it.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, because, me and my wife, something that we watch, and, we kind of like do the behind the scenes and how they prep, and, they do follow a lot, of what it is to be in a fine dining kitchen. And, you mentioned that there's kitchens where you can only say yes, chef, or
it's intense, and like our kitchen is not that intense, but we do hold extremely high standards, and standards that are probably not normal for a lot of people, like we clean everything. We clean our dumpster. You know what I mean? It's like, but that's what it takes, and we really want to be as good as we possibly can. And I think some of these things that are sort of ridiculous, like the way we fold our towels if they're sitting on a table, they're things that sort of transpire into us being better people. Like if we're organized in the kitchen, we're going to put out better food, and we're going to take pride and care into these things. And then perhaps that would translate into who we are outside of work, like carry ourselves with our heads high and be kind to people. Like, I don't know. I think that everything starts from something.
Yeah, and I think that also the fact that consistency is a huge part of successful restaurant or kitchen.
Totally, yeah.
So like having that what was that word? I had it right now, and when you're what's that word? When you have not commitment, but your
dedication.
The dedication to something, like making sure that that tells a whole other certain way. You're gonna have the dedication to make sure that you're using the same amount of ingredients, or all these things that go into making sure that the consistency in your food is there. It follows through everything else you're doing.
No, 100%. I mean, like when like right now we're making new dishes. And, we're going to try to change out 2 or 3 dishes every week, just like gearing up for a different season. And it's like when we're creating these dishes, we recipize it to the gram, like to the speckle of salt. Like it is completely grammed out, so that if people come back, they order something that they really enjoyed, it is completely consistent. We have so many server training on certain ways to fold our linen and greet guests and explain our mantra, and our customer service is really, really, fantastic. And our playlist, the music is great. The bathrooms are always perfect. Like, these are things that matter, and they're things that we hope to bring people back into the restaurant with. And yeah, like you said, consistency, and you have to be dedicated for sure in order to achieve consistency.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I honestly messed up in doing my research, because I didn't go. I kind of wanted to go before I had this talk.
No worries.
But definitely, plan to see me there. Next time me and my wife have a date night,
appreciate that.
we can go out there and
we welcome you
and have some dinner. But yeah, I mean, I really, really wanted to go, but I know that election season is going to come up, and I'm going to be busy with that. So I wanted to talk to you, as soon as possible.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Help you, promote. Like
really
you said,
appreciate it.
Like you said, we can't say there's nothing to do, and yet when we do have something to do, we don't promote it or support it. So this is my little way of supporting.
No, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's what we're looking for, is just local support. And like I said earlier, we want people to really feel like we are part of the community, and that they own us. Like they have Ursa. Ursa belongs to them. I think that's really important.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thank you for taking this time. I know it's one of your days off, and
no worries.
I know how tedious it is to. I mean, I've never owned a restaurant. I have friends that own restaurants. My brother owned a taqueria for a while, and it's a 24/7 job.
Oh my God, yeah.
So like, I appreciate you taking this time off.
Man,
and
this is
talking
so
to
much
me.
fun. Thanks for having me, and I really appreciate it, and hope to see you soon.
All right, for sure. Sure.
Yeah, take care.
All right, man. Well, thank you guys for listening or watching. Don't forget to go visit Ursa. Follow them on Instagram. I don't know if they're on Facebook, but Instagram for sure.
Ursa_desert.
And then there's a link to their website because you can do reservations.
You
on
can
their
do
website.
reservations. Walk-ins welcomed as well.
So yeah, all right, guys. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.